Hello and welcome. I will call the Monday, June 10th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to order here at 6:30 p.m. Our meeting tonight will be held in person and also virtually by using Zoom. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. I'll lead the meeting and the public will be welcome to participate when they're invited. We'll let you know members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via online Zoom. If the attendees experience audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted on the city website at www.burnsvillemn.gov. It's in the public meeting calendar portion of the website. Our meeting, as usual, will also be available on BCTV and on the city's website. If you're unable to participate this evening and you'd like to submit public testimony, I encourage you to email your comments to the city staff or mail your comments directly to City Hall. To participate online tonight, you can join on Zoom. That's zoom.us/join, and our meeting ID number is 839-8420-7546. Once you're logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you'd like to speak to. You can also call into the meeting. The telephone number is 651-372-8299. It is the same meeting ID number, 839-8420-7546. And for each of the public hearings, I'll open up a time when callers may speak to that item, and I'll give you more instructions at that time. Your call will be muted until it's your turn to speak. Please note there might be a slight delay. And if you're using the phone, please mute your computer because there may be a delay. We're on to our agenda items. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
No changes from staff.
Any changes from commissioners? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Commissioner John and seconded by Commissioner Hamilton. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Our next item is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, May 13th, 2024. Any changes to the minutes from staff?
No changes from staff.
Any changes to the minutes from commissioners? Seeing none, motion. Moved by Commissioner Timmerman, seconded by Commissioner Braddock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Our third item, this is a public hearing. This is the application of Nilli, Zubkova, and Liliya Babkin for a conditional use permit, CUP, for an open storage lot for semi-truck parking located at 1200 Highway 13 West. And Kevin Shea, planner, will be presenting. The floor is yours, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So before you have a conditional use permit for an open storage lot for semi-truck parking at 1200 Highway 13 West. I will note that I may talk about two addresses here as it will get re-addressed to 1200 on Lilydale as part of this, since it does not have access on, Ladybird, not Lilydale. Ladybird, it has access off of Ladybird versus Highway 13. So if I do interchange those two, just know I'm talking about the same property. But the address change has not happened yet. It would happen as things move forward. So for the site location map, you'll notice Highway 13 on the south side, Ladybird on the north side. The aerial does show that it is an undeveloped property currently. For the most part, there is an existing 3,200 square foot building on the south side, and then it's mostly undeveloped for the remainder of the site with quite a few significant trees on site. So there were, as part of the packet, a tree preservation plan and a tree inventory as well, and that's part of the comments and conditions in the report as well. The site is zoned B4 Gateway, so it's the B4 Highway Commercial with the Gateway District overlay on it, and the land use is the Minnesota River Quadrant, which brings the drinking water overlay piece component to it, so you'll notice some conditions in the engineering memo related to stormwater from that. To jump into the site plan, the applicant is proposing to improve the site Or I should give you a little background on this. The background is this application came forward from an existing code enforcement action. And this application was brought forward to remedy the code enforcement action that was done at that time. So that's what initiated this application. They are proposing to use the site and improve the site to essentially get approvals to approve essentially what's already happening there illegally. So with that, they're proposing to improve the site. Everything on the site plan in the brownish color is showing the drive aisles that will be paved. The yellow is the parking stalls that will be paved. So they are proposing to use 106 of semi-truck vehicle parking bays of various sizes. There was a breakdown in the report on the different sizes for large semis, somewhat smaller, and then kind of like half semis. And then there are 20 visitor parking stall bays. There's only 6 required by the city code, and that's just based on the existing building that they will be using as office space to run the business to have semi-truck parking on the site. So that's on the essentially center of the south lot line, and then the vehicle each have the parking bays associated with it. A couple things to note on here. One of the comments in the staff report and a condition in the in the recommended changes is for the entire site to have curb and gutter around the perimeter of the parking lot. That's a city code requirement. It's not currently shown on here, so there may be some minor adjustments as those can take 12 to 18 inches depending on which curb they use, which could adjust by a foot to a foot and a half on some of the dimensions on the side. They do have adequate space to make that change. And then a condition from the city engineer as well, or the engineering memo, was turning truck movements to verify that everyone in the various spaces shown can back in and out adequately. So that is one thing that was not submitted as part of the application materials. As far as the landscape plan, I'll mention this because landscaping is a key component for a CUP with a semi-truck parking, as screening is a major requirement as part of an application for that. So they currently have shown the purple trees and the green trees are preserved trees of different species and varieties, whereas the neon green trees are the newer trees that are being proposed. The landscape plan as it currently sits does not meet the ordinance requirements by quite a lot of shrubs and then some deciduous coniferous and ornamental trees. And additionally, the screening needs to happen on the west, north, east, and south lot lines, so all the lot lines. The south is an exception in that there's a significant existing vegetative area in the Highway 13 area that will be preserved as part of this. So staff is comfortable with that will provide the screening for the south lot line, but the west, north, and east need to provide full screening for semi-trucks at maturity for the plantings. So as they've currently proposed, the lime green is the arborvitae or ornamental trees, which don't provide a full screening at maturity. They're much more narrow than you typically want for a screening. So one of the recommendations in the staff report is from staff to meet the ordinance standards is that a variety of trees be used to provide that screening. So there's going to be a mixture of coniferous, deciduous, shrubs, things like that to provide a more year-round full screening from essentially ground level up to the height of a semi, which would be about 14 feet tall. So that's another condition in the memo as well. And as part of that, the city forester did ask for the woodland evaluation packet, which would then tell us how much needs to be replaced on site as well. They provided a very comprehensive tree inventory, but it didn't evaluate the cost of replacement for the trees based on that they're removing over the allowed threshold. So with that, the conditional use is for an open storage lot, which is the semi-truck parking is considered open storage lot in the code. It is an allowed conditional use. It does not have any additional standards other than to conform with the conditional use permit standards and meet the screening requirements. So there are no other standards called out specifically for the use. So they're proposing to use it for the 106 semi-truck parking stalls. As I mentioned, I kind of ran through these conditions, which are the curb and gutter, the woodland evaluation worksheet, and then the additional landscaping to meet the landscape standards and the screening standards. So there will be quite a number of additional trees and shrubs on the site. And then as I mentioned, this will be changed to be off of Lady Bird Lane instead of Highway 13. With that, so staff does recommend, based on the fact that they have conditions in here to satisfy where they're deficient to meet the standards in the ordinance, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the conditional use permit for an open storage lot to be located at 1200 Highway 13 West, subject to the 8 conditions that were in your packet, which essentially covered what I mentioned through the presentation, along with the outstanding engineering memo conditions as well. So with that, the applicant is present and staff is here for questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Great presentation. My first question, you know, there's a couple like curb and gutter and the plantings conditions. Is that stuff that the applicant knew about kind of prior to the process and is submitting without knowing that, or is this stuff that just kind of is kind of a notification that's late in the process? Do you know?
So the applicant has been working with staff for a long time because of the code enforcement action, so they've been made aware of all the requirements surrounding this. I think them formally being put into text like this in terms of exactly what's needed for the curb and gutter and things like that, this is the first time that it's been formalized in a written other than emails.
Yeah.
But they have been made aware of that information and pointed to the specific city code sections where these requirements are coming from.
Curb and gutter, it's required on these type of projects for what?
It's required for all parking.
For all parking.
It's just
Okay,
a
just-
standard from the parking section.
Okay.
It's numeral 7 under the parking section. Curb and gutter is required on all parking areas, paved parking areas.
And then my next question is, so it's basically been an unpaved storage lot, and that's what the problem has been, is kind of what I'm reading.
Yep.
And what's the advantage of paving it versus leaving it and what's the risk of leaving it unpaved?
Just that paved is required for the use, for
Okay.
the open storage lot use. So right now they're operating without the conditional use permit to permit the use. And then all the requirements for paving and having curb and gutter and screening and landscaping are all part of the requirement to have that conditional use permit.
Yeah.
So it's just it's bringing the site into compliance with the conditional use permit standards that are necessary to operate a business of this
Okay.
manner in the B4 district.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from other commissioners? Commissioner John?
So this area here, thank you, Chair. It seems to be the site of the old dirt remediation we did in that area, is that correct?
I believe so, but
Oh,
don't
sure.
exactly know the background of that from, I'd have to lean on other staff for that one.
Okay.
But
And as I was driving through, I just noticed there was a lot of dirt still there. Are these, that obviously will have to be moved, and looked like there was a old truck and et cetera sort of things sitting there. All that would have to be cleaned up as a part of the remediation or the efforts to clean up the site.
Correct.
And is there any, I don't see any reference to any kind of screening as far as fencing or anything along those lines. Is it gonna be completely with trees?
So the condition was for trees, as that was deemed the most, to be the most effective, then you don't have to install gates and things. And the trees by themselves can meet the screening standards. If they wanted to propose an alternative and do a mixture of two, maybe do the fencing on the east and west lot lines, staff can work with them to make sure that that complies with the ordinance standards for type of fencing and height of fencing. But typically when you're screening something and the ordinance requirement is for the screening to match the height of what you're screening, so in this case, semi-trucks are 14 feet tall, so fencing doesn't adequately screen that, just given the height difference. So you have to do at least some type of combination. They could at least meet the ordinance standards with just landscaping, but they could do a combination, but they couldn't do just fencing, because it would be not the appropriate height to screen the semi-trucks.
How long would it take for this landscaping to make it be screened?
That entirely depends on what species are proposed to plant.
Right.
So things mature at different rates, and so as part of that, we'd look for a mixture of those plantings to be ones that mature quicker, and to be interspaced with ones that might mature slower. That way you get certain areas that may mature to different heights, but may mature at the base versus the top. That's the difference between coniferous and deciduous, to make sure we have year-round and things that are fuller at the bottom base of the tree versus the top of the tree. Those are all things that'll be reviewed once we have a full complement of a landscape plan to review to make sure that all those things would come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Hamilton?
So, is this strictly a trailer drop-off or tractor and trailer? And are the drivers spending the night on lot, or how's that working?
Yep, so it would, because it's an open storage lot, it would just, the trailers, whether it's the entire, so there wouldn't be idling vehicles, but there could be like semi-truck trailer, or turned off vehicles are fine as well. It's an open storage lot, so they would be parking there overnight. Since this is a storage lot, so they would have, that's the difference between parking and storage essentially, is that there's overnight continued use of the same stall. I think in the narrative they explained that there would be about 35 semi vehicles per day that would be swapped or essentially switched out. So when you think of if every space was turning over at the same rate, roughly 4, 5, 6 days they could all be turned over, but they can store them there for as long as necessary to essentially get the next client in that they would be using to store the space.
Are there any accommodations for the drivers that use, like, are there restrooms or biffs or anything for them to use, or are they strictly on their own?
There's currently the office space, the 3,238 square foot office space on the site, with its facilities, which would have a bathroom.
But that's
but
only open from 7 to 5.
Correct. So outside of those hours, and the business is not intended to operate outside of those hours, that's their use hours. There may be, as things come in, they might be a little later than 5 o'clock or things like that. But the drivers would use those facilities on site when they're open. When they're not open, they would have to find other accommodations.
Final question. Yeah, is there any type of security measures for those trucks in the trailers to keep them secure, or is it being monitored at all, or strictly at the driver's risk?
I would have you direct that question to the applicants. They haven't made aware for the security measures they plan to put in
We have
place.
a gate,
Gate,
gates, yes.
thank you.
So, and we have a couple of cameras too.
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson had a question.
Is there enough space left after putting all the parking spots in to replace all the trees that need to be replaced?
That's part of the woodland evaluation packet that we'll look to. If there's not, there is a fee in lieu where they would pay, and then we would then use that as part of it goes into a fund that would be used to plant trees on public areas. So they could use that as an alternative. So if there's not the space available to have a healthy tree grow, that is another option.
I also noticed there was a buckthorn that was a significant tree. The forestry department wouldn't agree with
Yeah,
that.
it has to be listed as one of the trees that we would accept as a significant tree.
Commissioner Timmerman?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Shea, I'm curious about neighboring properties as well, as far as the code enforcement actions. It looks like there's a number of properties that are similarly situated. Is this something that's been educational for everyone in this particular zoning district, or is this just for this business? Because I see some, like the Asselford International, the Nuss Trucking, very similar with the unpaved surfaces. Biff's looks good. We looked at that recently. Park Chrysler, I think they at one time had unpaved, but we looked at that recently. So is this something that is being enforced across this district?
I believe so. I didn't handle the code enforcement piece of this, so I don't know, Kevin, if you can talk to more specifically on that piece of it.
Yeah, so basically what happened is the city received a complaint about this property specifically. And since our code enforcement right now is complaint-based exclusively, we were only acting on this particular property which we received the complaint on.
All right, so my follow-up to that is, I think that in equitable consideration needs to be taken, and additional properties in the area that seem to be situated similarly also need to be reviewed. So, but otherwise, this project's fine.
Seeing no further questions from commissioners, we'll move to the public hearing section of this item. So we'll open a public hearing today at 6:49. And if there's anyone in the audience that wants to speak, please step up to the podium and state your name and address. And in the meantime, if there's anyone on Zoom that wants to speak, is there anyone on Zoom for this item? Okay, nobody on Zoom, and nobody coming to the podium in the council chamber. So we'll close the public hearing also at 6:49. And we'll move it to discussion from commissioners. Commissioner Timmerman.
I think the project's fine. I mean, it meets the needs of your business, it seems. Like I commented, I think just ensuring that we're handling businesses equitably, is very important to me and our city, or at least it should be. So I would like to, again, reiterate that I think that there should be some examination on the neighboring properties as well. That said, if there's not discussion, I'd make a motion.
I got a question.
Yeah, okay, can you approach the podium and state your name and address,
Yes,
please?
my name is Tony Zubkova. I'm working in that property also. We have a little shop over there. Can we make some works in that, not outside, inside? It is permitted or not?
I'm not,
It is not big shop, it's just like maybe 120 feet by 80.
I think if you were asking about additional things outside that, what we have in the application here, I'd just ask you to come talk with staff and email us so we can talk through that, because we want to make sure that it's consistent with city code.
No, inside the building, not outside.
Yeah, I just don't know what you're talking, in terms of operations, if it's vehicle
Just-
operations, minor oil
just
changes,
change-
repairs,
oil
things are like
change, yeah,
that.
oil
I'd just
change.
have you work with staff on that, because it wouldn't be part of this existing application.
So I need to talk to you?
Yeah, talk to the city planning staff, myself, Kevin, Deb, yeah.
Okay. That's all.
okay, the floor is yours again, Mr.
Yeah, thank
Timmerman.
you. So I'll make a motion to approve based on the 8 conditions that Mr. Shea highlighted. Since I do have the floor, I'd thank the applicant for trying to come into compliance. I appreciate that.
So there's a motion, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. So this will, and when a motion carries unanimously, it will be on the city council consent agenda, which means they don't necessarily talk about it. When is the next city council meeting, or when will this be on the city council consent agenda? Do you know?
This will go on the July 16th consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. And now we're on to our next item. This is another public hearing. This is the application of Sam Trebesch of Loucks Incorporated for a preliminary and final plat to create a single lot from 2 existing lots to be known as Heart of the City West, to construct a new 170 unit apartment building at 151 and 201 Burnsville Parkway West. Also presenting planner, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So this before you tonight is the preliminary and final plat for Heart of the City West. It's 151 and 201 Burnsville Parkway West. The new lot will get a new address. It's been identified for 175 Burnsville Parkway West. For the single lot, as it'll combine the 2 existing lots. It is located, if you're familiar, we looked at the MWF Diamond Head site, which is across the street. This one's just to the south of Burnsville Parkway. It is 2 parcels, the triangle parcel and then the rectangle parcel you see on the screen. It is zoned TOD and guided the same. So as part of that, we looked through those TOD requirements. I will note the reason for the request being only preliminary and final plat base is that the applicant has met all of the requirements from the TOD and the zoning ordinance, which means they go through an administrative process through staff without coming through the planning commission and city council for the development of the property. So before you tonight is just the plat request, the preliminary and final plat. I have included information, standard information in the packet to help outline why they're doing the preliminary plat, to help for context. And I will go through the site plan and landscape plan on here, as I think it's just helpful for both yourselves and the public to know what's happening on the site, ultimate end goal. So the preliminary plat as it sits today, nothing on the site changes from the plat perspective. It's just combining the 2 existing lots and then dedicating the perimeter drainage and utility easements that are required for preliminary for all plats. Everything else remains the same. The access easements that are existing today stay the same. Everything gets just carried over to the plat. So there's nothing really changing between those 2. It's just to clean up and plat the 2 properties that are currently unplatted lots. So the site plan, I guess you'll call it kind of an L-shaped building, a little bit more of a horseshoe almost, is the building that contains essentially 1 story of underground parking over 4 stories above ground. There's two accesses into the site, so one existing access. I'll just hop back. There are three currently on the site as it stands today. The center access goes away with this, and the the east and the west side accesses remain. So with that, that's essentially where the apartment building goes. So the access up on the east side is still maintained for the parcel to the east. And then the western access is the one that would then function as the main access for this site. So if you're looking at the lower left side of the screen, the access comes in from that side, enters. The underground parking is on the end of the building closest when you drive in. And then the surface parking is essentially in the center of the site. They do have some amenities on site. Most of the units have balconies, along with they have a tot lot with a playground area that's on essentially inside of the east edge of the building to the site. They do have stormwater on site. And the 170 units, I believe there's a breakdown in the report, but they're a mixture of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom units to make up the mixture with that. As far as the landscape plan, they meet ordinance standards for the landscape plan for number of trees, meeting the criteria for variety of species, deciduous, coniferous, ornamentals, and shrubs. As you can see, it's pretty much scattered throughout the site to mixture up the landscaping for the site, making sure they enhance the areas visible from Burnsville Parkway West as well. In terms of elevations, they do meet the architecture standards. It is a combination of 2 types of lap siding. They do have some vertical siding, which is the hardy gray slate. They do have 2 styles. They have this concrete masonry units that do the split face, and then they do have some cast stone as well. So they have a good variety. You can see I only included 1 imagery here because I think it kind of adequately did it, but there's more elevations than just this given the nature and the shape of the building to meet the building setback lines. So we have the build 2 lines in the TOD district, so they were between 20 and 25 feet on all property lines that had the setback line. So matching that and meeting that, they have quite a number of elevations of the building to change the shape of it. But they do provide, the horizontal breaks, the vertical breaks, the change in materials, the balconies on there, everything meets the TOD district ordinance standards. They have been working extensively with staff to come to this point, so there's been a lot of back and forth to make sure they could meet these ordinance standards, which is why it has come in meeting all our standards, which is, I believe, a first for the TOD, if I'm correct. As far as the preliminary and final plat, for preliminary and final plats, the standards are pretty minimal when you're doing a site that doesn't have any public infrastructure improvements as part of it, but just the private side. So it's got to meet the minimum lot width, depth, size standards for the TOD district, which it does all of that, given that the size of it is 4.47 acres and the minimum required is, I believe, 20,000 square feet. So you're well above it on that, and same with lot width and depth as well. And they do dedicate the required D&U drainage and utility easements along the lot lines as well. So with that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the application of Sam Trebesch of Loucks Incorporated for a preliminary and final plat of Heart of the City West to allow construction of a 170-unit apartment building at what would be called 175 Burnsville Parkway West, subject to the 7 conditions contained in the from staff. With that, I will stand for any questions from the Commission, and then the applicant is present tonight as well, if you wish to direct questions to them as well.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shea. Again, great presentation. In the background report that you sent to us, there was a paragraph under background that I thought was great. And paragraph 2, it says the applicant has worked with staff to ensure all zoning ordinance standards, architecture, parking, landscaping, et cetera, have been met with the proposed development. Wow, that's awesome. So thank you to the applicant, I appreciate that. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Anderson.
If I remember correctly, this is the same company that built the building on the, by the Orange Line station, Roars.
I guess I'm not familiar with that project, so I can't say for sure, but I know Roars has done a number of developments in the immediate area and surrounding communities as well.
Well, I know we had some problems there because they raised the rent on their parking inside and forced a lot of people outside, and they're using public spaces versus private spaces that are on site. Is there enough on-site on this to?
They do meet the required, there's 266 stalls required as part of the ordinance, with 107 of them being enclosed, because they have 170 units, and they are meeting that with having exactly 266 spaces on site. So with the ordinance standards being met, that would be all we would typically require as part of that. If there are observed parking issues, so there is one that staff is working with the owner of the building to install some proof of parking on, which I believe is the building you're mentioning, but that while it may have been developed by Roars, is now in different hands. So we're working with the owner of that building to have additional parking included in that site. But that site was developed at a slightly less ratio of parking given the TOD allowances for reduced parking near transit hubs.
So you both have mentioned Roars, and this application is a company called Loucks. Are they
The
same?
Loucks is the engineer, so they were the applicant that applied on behalf of Roars.
Got it, okay,
Yep.
thank you for the clarification.
So we just include the name of the person who submitted the actual application, and I think that's directly correlated to the fact that it's a plat application, which would be handled by an engineering company typically, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner John?
Thank you, Chair. So we're getting a lot of apartment complexes right along this whole corridor here. Has the city thought about or had done a traffic study at all, Burnsville Parkway?
I don't know if you call it a traffic study, but there was the parking study that was done as part of the city, as part of that, so that was not led by me and I wasn't involved in it, so I can't speak to the specifics on it, but I do know it went through an evaluation of proposed traffic and the counts and the amount that would then be filtered onto roadways. And that was a very recent study that was done in the last year. So with that, they were looking at capacity of roadways and things like that. So I know consideration has been taken to make sure that there's adequate capacity on the roadways to serve the users that are expected as part of the TOD district.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Timmerman?
Thank you, Chair. The question I have is related to kind of the structure of the rentals. Is this intended to be market rate, subsidized, senior? I know that, as Commissioner John said, we've had a lot of buildings go up lately, and I have not yet heard of one that's affordable housing. So I'm curious what the structure is for this particular project.
As far as I'm aware from the applicant, it's intended to be market rate for the entirety of the building.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
I noticed when I drove by there's still a number of tenants in the building. How long before this development really starts?
I believe those applicants have been, or the tenants of the building have been given until the end of August. I don't know if time frames will change, but that's what in talking with another city staff member who's more working on the economic development portion of it, that those tenants have been given until the end of August to find new spaces to occupy.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Shea. We'll move to the public hearing section of this item. I will open the public hearing today at 7:03. And if you are in the audience and would like to speak to this item, please approach the podium and state your name and your address.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. My name is Pete Schroeder. I'm with Roars Companies, the applicant. We're at 2 Carlson Parkway, Plymouth, Minnesota. Thank you for your time this evening. We're really excited about this project, and thank you to Kevin for the presentation. Just a couple clarifying questions based off your comments. This will be a 4% LIHTC deal, so it won't be market rate. All units will be rent restricted to 60% AMI of Dakota County. And then going off the timeline, we are expected to acquire the property in August and start construction in September. And then we're planning around an 18 to 20 month construction timeframe.
Very, very exciting. Do any commissioners have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Timmerman?
No, I just wanted to thank you for that clarification. That helps.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room would like to speak to this matter? And is there anyone on Zoom?
Nope.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Aaron Boltsutter. I'm at 13,000 Harriet Avenue South. I'm just curious, given that this is within the TOD district, I know that there was mention of a traffic study and looking into, the considerations of traffic. Has the city considered upgrades to transit infrastructures, like bus shelters, things of that nature, alternates to driving, as there is new development being built up along this corridor?
That'd be a question for staff. I'm not sure that I can answer that.
As part of the traffic study, I believe that the evaluation of that was intended to come back with a second to look at what type of infrastructure improvements would be necessary to upgrade and maintain the system at adequate levels of service. I don't know the status of that, but I'm speaking for the city engineer in this case, that's a follow-up step that would come about as part of that traffic study.
Yep, and this is a TOD is the transit-oriented district, so all that is an important part of.
Correct, yeah.
Of being in a transit-oriented district.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:06 p.m. and we'll move it back to the commissioners for discussion or a motion. Commissioner John.
Thank you, Chair. This is great that we're getting all these apartment complexes, and having more people into the city is always great, and I really appreciate you guys choosing Burnsville. We're a great place, and you have a proven track record of the buildings that you put in. I think they're really well put together. If anybody else has comments, otherwise I'm willing to make a recommendation.
Did anyone else have a comment for Commissioner Anderson?
I just wanted to talk, the bus shelter, there are 2 bus shelters within the district besides the regular MVTA parking lot, and one of them's within 3 or 4 blocks of this site.
Oh, thank you. Back to you, Commissioner John.
Well, with that, I would like to I really do hope that the city does look at a traffic study at some point, given, the amount of complexes are coming in. I would hate to see, traffic slow down in that corridor. But I would like to recommend the city council, make a motion that we recommend the city council approve the application of Sam Trebesch, Loucks Incorporated, for a preliminary plat and final plat of Heart of the City West to construct a 170-unit apartment building at 175 Burnsville Parkway West, subject to the listed 7 conditions.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Commissioner Braddock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is updates. And what it says here is that our next planning commission meeting is July 8th. Is that correct?
Yep, so the next meeting, we didn't have any applications following that cycle, so we will be canceling that next meeting, and there will be many, I believe, coming forward on that July 8th meeting.
We keep hearing that, so I'm looking forward to it. Any other updates from staff?
That's all.
Okay. Any updates from commissioners? No updates. And our last item is adjournment. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Timmerman?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hamilton? All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.